Hi, everyone. So I'm going to have to talk about the difficult relationship between marketing, getting traction, how to reach what some people call escape velocity. So I'm going to start. I'm going to share some of our own experience at Scoop.it, some of the things we tried. I try to make it pretty concrete. But I also wanted to start maybe debunking some myth that have been debated today. Let me get that right. Okay, so the first thing I want to start is there's this idea that is very frequent in Silicon Valley that I started hearing when I was in grad school, like a long time ago, that good products don't need marketing. And that actually startups shouldn't do marketing. And so maybe some of you think that. Maybe some of you that actually thought that super strongly actually left and skipped the whole session. And I think it's a myth. And I think the origin of that myth comes a lot with confusing marketing and advertising. And to be fair with people who think about that, I think advertising is something a startup shouldn't do, except in very exceptional occasion. Because advertising can blur the lines between, when you're trying to assess product market fit. If you're buying your first users, you might, be drinking your own Kool-Aid and thinking you're getting product market fit when actually you're just spending money. And the other thing is advertising should help you scale, but not, scaling is not a problem as long as you haven't reached product market fit. But marketing is different, and if you want a top-level proof of that, you just need to look at the top PR agencies in Silicon Valley. Those guys are charging $20, $25K a month, and you have all of the cool names out there, like companies like Path, Stripe, Evernote, Quora. Zynga is actually on both slides. I don't know who they've been using at the beginning. So if marketing didn't work, so why are the successful startups of Silicon Valley paying that much money to PR companies? And the other thing which I think people are confusing is, I love the lean startup concept. I really think, it changed my life. I had a first company which was successful and then failed miserably in the second because we weren't a lean startup. So I had to learn the lean startup the hard way. And we applied some of that in Scoop.it. But I think it's great to hear one of the tier 1 VCs in Silicon Valley start to express himself about the concerns around the lean startup, that some people are actually using the lean startup methodology to say, oh, I shouldn't do sales and marketing because my product will sell itself alone. And I think, I'm an engineer, and I think, when I started working, I hated marketing. It was so hard to build products. It was so hard to build some stuff with, dealing with technical problems. Oh, and now I have to market it. I felt miserable about that. So if you're convinced about doing marketing, and obviously if you're still here, you are, as a founder or would-be founder, the next thing that is probably coming to your mind is that there's going to be a lot to market around your product. And again, when you build products, when you're an engineer or when you're a startup founder, you think, oh, I'm going to have a great launch, and then I'm going to do this update, and then I'm going to have a new release, and I'm going to do a product, blah, blah, blah. And you think those are going to be your marketing opportunities. And you're right. But the problem with that is you have diminishing returns. And to give you an example and share on our experience, this is the blue line is our traffic on Scoop.it. And yeah, to be fair, when we started our private beta, we were super happy to be covered by the Next Web for the launch of our private beta. It was actually not exactly the launch. It took us a few weeks to get their attention. But you can see from the magnifier that we had like a 20x, 30x increase in our traffic, which, starting from 0 is not that hard. But it was a big boost for us. We felt super great. The problem is we had, and the green lines are actually, I did them wrong, but we had some other product launches along those lines. And you can see we didn't really have some of those bumps. The growth actually didn't come from doing product updates. Because the problem with product updates and new releases and everything is you're not going to do that every day, right? You're not even going to do that every week. And you're lucky if you have something new on your product every month. So, and the thing is, as you grow your traffic and as you're trying to build traction, you're going to have diminishing returns. So you can't just rely on that. You can't think about My marketing is always going to be improving my product, and I'm going to be doing some announcement, and TechCrunch is going to love me because they're going to talk about my new tweaks of my product all the time. So if you want to reach escape velocity, meaning getting solid traction, you have to do something more than getting those few bumps that product upgrades, new releases, and everything will give you. And I told you I was an engineer, so I can actually understand that graph. So I'm not saying this is the solution to that problem, but this is a solution we found, which is we're not trying to get people who are interested to talk about this concept to join us in a series we call Lean Content. It's about trying to use content marketing as a way to get some fuel in your marketing in between product launches and fundraising and other stuff that will get you some good visibility. So before I talk about lean content, where should I point that? Yeah. Okay, just defining content marketing. Eric touched on that a bit. There's a definition by J.D. Lacyka on this. It's the whole idea that if you publish interesting content, then people will start following you, start to see you. No one Googles you, right? And no one Googles the startup you haven't created yet. But they Google things that are interesting to them. They click on those links and those hashtags on Twitter that are interesting to them. And so if you publish that content, then if that content is linked to you, they will discover you through the content. So content marketing is an opportunity to define your space, to educate your initial users, to engage with them, start building that community, be the resource that people point to, like, who's the thought leader on this? Well, there's a great, there was a slide that was from Flurry in the previous presentation. I think it was from the Flurry blog. Those guys are thought leaders. They've done a good job. I mean, you pointed to their slides about engagement and retention. So that's great content. And that's helping you build brand loyalty. Now, the problem with the clicker is that it doesn't work. Okay. So the problem with content marketing, it works, but it's time consuming. And so most of the time, okay.
Signal us for now.
All right. So the problem with content marketing is it's not easy. If you look at creating content, this can be tricky, and we've been through that ourselves. And again, I told you my second startup, my second project was a failure, and there's been a lot of things we did wrongly, including on the content side. And so the idea of the lean content is to try to apply some of the stuff that the lean startup methodology did for startups to content, meaning iterating, learning, choosing the fast shortcuts over the very long, very detailed, very prepared ways to do content. Is my clicker working now? Okay, so what I want to make that concrete, I want to share some strategies that works for us. That, again, this is something which is in the building, and there's no clear definition. There's no book on lean content. If somebody wants to write one, we're very happy to discuss with them. But I wanted to share some strategies that worked for us. Want to go next? So the first thing is using SlideShare. So one of the problems you have with content is it's actually not so hard to create some of the content. Like everyone who's never done a PowerPoint or a keynote presentation in their life? No one. Okay. So you already created content. Some of that content is probably worth sharing. Or actually, you should try to put yourself in a position of actually share it. And the thing is, if you leverage SlideShare, you're going to have a lot of visibility. SlideShare is actually a very good platform to get you distribution. And if you think about it, it solves a problem you have. I think somebody asked a question, like if I publish some content, who's going to read that if I have 0 followers on Twitter? Maybe or just one, which is my mom. So look at platforms which are actually offering you a distribution channel, and SlideShare is great for that. We've built interesting. We don't have a lot of followers. We have like 61 followers, but we build up a lot of views on our Scoop.it channel through SlideShare. And this presentation will be on SlideShare, by the way. So the other thing you can do, which is a bit in the same spirit, is you can instead of blogging on your own blog and have only your co-founder read it, you can actually try to guest post in other outlets. And so eventually we got on TechCrunch, Business Insider, Fast Company, but we didn't start there. You can actually try to identify the blogs which are in your particular niche, on your particular segment, which are interesting. And maybe they're not that famous, but they have an audience. They have an established audience. So if you provide good stories to them, they will be likely to publish you. And that's a way to also leverage. I mean, I'm a lazy guy. I hate. I love to write, but it's like as a concept, when I have to write, it's actually painful. And it's all the more painful if I know nobody will read it. So, that convinced me that, it was worth my time actually writing 800 words or something. The other thing which I think works in a bit of the same way, and then I'll give you a fourth idea which is different, is Quora. A lot of people have thought about Quora as a question and answer platform. I see that as a blogging platform where actually I can see who is going to read this. Because people are asking the question. So if you see a question that has like 252 followers and 30,000 people who viewed the question and people following the topic, you know that those people are going to pay attention to your answer, or they're more likely to. So you're not blogging in a vacuum. You have people who are waiting for your answer, and they're more savvy and they're probably more influential. So it's again a great way to make sure you have an impact, and also start building a community, because then people will vote you up, comment, or say you're a jerk and you're totally wrong. But still, that's a great way to engage people. So the last one I want to give you is about our own eating our own dog food. We're a content curation platform, so of course content curation is a great thing to do. You don't have to do it on Scoop.it. You can do whatever you want, but this is solving the other part of the problem with content, which is I didn't want to go spend time and efforts creating content if no one was going to see it. But the other way to look at it is there's great content out there that I could actually publish, that I could leverage, and I could actually enrich with my opinion. Say, oh, here's why it is important to read this or watch that video. Or actually say, I totally disagree with that, and here's why. So it's a form of expression which is actually very valuable, and which is also going to be a much quicker way to validate some of the things you want to validate in a content strategy. So it could actually be your starting point, because it's pretty easy to leverage other people's content. It's a way to express your expertise. And the other thing is, if you're not sure what you should write or what you should create, if you start curating content, you're going to be able to identify things that people haven't seen. I showed you, I had an article on Fast Company the other day. There was about Facebook graph search. And a lot of the discussion on graph search were around, oh, Facebook is going to blow it because they don't know how to build product anymore. There was the Facebook versus Google competition. So by curating a lot of those stories, I was able to see, well, no one's really thinking the way I'm thinking about this, which is Facebook is about the, graph search is potentially about the interest graph, but there's a tension with, privacy. So the point is I had my own particular angle on that. And so if you're curating on a specific topic, you're going to see what people are writing. And then you can see, oh, actually no one's writing about this, or no one's giving the angle I want to give. And that's going to help you be better at creating content as well. So if you want to shoot for the stars and reach that escape velocity, what I encourage you to think is, like, first you need some marketing. I hope we all agree. Product launches think of it as the booster. You need that, and you need to be marketing your product launches, absolutely. But you can have some intermediate layers, like stages of a rocket, with content curation, leveraging other people's content, leveraging distribution that you don't have yet through SlideShare, Quora, guest posting. And then ultimately you'll be able to build your blog much more easily, and you'll have a world famous brand, and you'll be on the moon, etc. So final slide. If you're interested in the concept of lean content, is still something which is in the building. We're looking for people to help us shape that. We have a meetup group there. We blog about it as well when we're not that lazy. And if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer. Thanks. Hi. Hi.
I'll talk a little loudly, I guess. So that graph of your growth is actually pretty impressive. And if you correlate that growth that you guys have seen versus the different parts of the market that you showed, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. You know, how much of what the success you've seen do you think is due to product launches versus the content curation? You know, in the time, if you look at the timeline, how do you correlate those two things?
Yeah, so it's a good point, and I want to clarify something. We didn't have that curve because of marketing entirely. If you don't have product market fit, you don't have product market fit, and you don't have a rocket. And so my point was to show that we had diminishing returns on spot actions that were actually giving us, think of it like an email blast. If you send an email to 100,000 people, they're going to act on that very same day, but they're not going to act the following day. So you want to have something more continuous. And so the whole point of this is that we constantly combine all of this. And this is what helps us build a community that says, oh, those guys seem to have a vision and know what they're talking about. I want to engage with them, like getting some people who want to talk about the space who can potentially be your ambassadors. And so this is a continuum. And my whole point was that I cannot pinpoint one of those things here and say, they gave me 5% and this gave me 7%. So this is why it's so important to make it lean, because you're not going to be able to say, like traditional marketers, I put 150K on this and I have a 10% return or whatever. So you want to be lean on this, and you want to do it with whatever resources you have, and work it the other way around, which is a startup way of thinking about this. Is I have so many people, I'll just do the most efficient stuff.
How do you balance being like George Takei and just putting out tons of ultra lean content but getting a mass audience versus specialization about your field and sort of thought leadership that may have a very small audience?
So we're all for the latter. And I think this is where the concept of personal brand that Eric talked about is actually dangerous. Well, I like the idea of you should have a personal brand, but if you're a startup, you're probably focusing on something that needs to be identified very clearly. And so if you talk about a lot of random stuff just because they're popular, I don't think you'll be able to really resonate. And I think that the people who were actually able to build a very large follower base on a lot of different topics, that was a full-time job for them. And if you're a founder, you have a full-time job already. And actually, what we see on Scoop.it is that the more precise your topics are defined, the better chances you have that you'll be picked up by the right people and that you'll build a follower. We're believing a lot in the topic-centric model, where it's about the topic and not so much, a broad coverage of everything.
I'm over here in the front row. In your stages, you say content curation sort of basically comes right after product launch. Can you speak a little bit to how that works logically? Because who am I curating content for if I don't yet really have an audience?
So I think initially what we were, so first of all, I'm, that sequence of things is not rigid. It looks like it is, but one of the points I was making is if you don't know what content to create, if you start by curating, it will help you identify it, so you might as well do that first. But the other answer to that is a lot of the time, when you're going to be doing some research, like trying to get customer development, trying to understand some of the things like the ecosystem, the competitors and everything, curating content is actually something that's going to be very valuable to yourself. Now, if you think of like the tons of stuff you've read to understand the market, why would you make that private? Why not sharing it? Why not progressively, share your thoughts and say, oh, this connects with that? Then the more you're going to be doing that, the more you're going to be, the better you will be, and that helps you, start building a following around that topic. Okay. Well, thank you.